every day this month, I'm going to be reading something in celebration of Black History Month. Black History Month started in 1926. It was originally just a week called Negro History Week. And then in the 70s, President Ford made it a month. And ever since then, every president has issued a proclamation. Now, there is a question of some funding at the federal level this year, but in regards to how that there's not going to be any celebration of it, and also in the National Archives, while Martin Luther King is still on the site, there have been some things taken down at the museum because they were too controversial. For example, in the Step into History photo booth, a photo of Martin Luther King was replaced with a photo of President Nixon shaking hands with Elvis. And that in itself is ironic, especially since Elvis was highly influenced by Black music, and Little Richard said Elvis opened the door for Black music. So there's that. And of course, Nixon is a whole nother thing. Anyway, I'm happy to celebrate this month, and I think we all need to learn a little history. Doesn't matter what the archives removes. We've got enough books in the world to talk about it. So I also want to say, so what I'm reading is from this book, The People Could Fly, American Black Folktales by Virginia Hamilton. Let's talk about Virginia Hamilton, give credit for the author. She is Black. She's a Black American. Sorry, she passed in 2002, but she wrote 41 books, and she won many medals, the Newbery Medal, and her work was called, her works were celebrated for exploring the African American experience, what she called liberation literature. So I'm so happy I have this book. I just got it. And I do want to say that I will not be reading it exactly in the vernacular because it's more of a Southern vernacular, and I don't want it to appear the way I read it as fake, if that makes sense. But I do want to respect the spirit of the story and the culture. So for example, if I was from the South, I would say children, because some Southern dialects, right, say children instead of children. But that is not how I would talk. So I just want to say that I will be not changing the words, but some of the pronunciation will not be in the dialect it's written, if that makes sense, because I don't have that dialect, and it will just sound like I'm making fun. It could sound like I'm making fun of these tales. So, okay, let's get started. This is the last story in the animal tales section. Next week we start the fanciful stories. So, this is called The Wolf and Birds and the Fish Horse. Think a sea wave left this tale on the doorstep. This about one wolf and his nephew. And this nephew, they were having this dance out there across the water. And this nephew wanted to fool Wolf. So he told Wolf it was going to be a feast and not a dance. Wolf found the birds, asked them to lend him feathers so he could go fly across to the feast. The birds did give him feathers. Wolf went out there, and the dance started up. Wolf was angry when he saw there was a dance and not a feast. Wolf asked his nephew for something to eat. Nephew said, "No, there's nothing to eat. There is no feast. It's a dance." The feast, the first one to get up and dance was Black Crow. Wolf gets awful loud, says, "Black Crow, you think you somebody. If you didn't always dig up folks' corn, you'd be free. You'd be fine." Crow took back the feather he'd given the wolf. The next one to dance was Ugly Vulture. Wolf had to go say, "Vulture, you think you somebody. If you wasn't always looking for dead goats and donkeys to eat, you might just be fine." That made Vulture take his feather back too. Here comes to dance old Blue Jay. Wolf stared, saying, Wolf started, says, "Blue Jay, you think you somebody. Good thing you don't see that red mouth of yours. Without it, you be fine." Blue Jay went ahead and took back his feather. Dancing by came the hawk. Old Wolf had to say, "You hawk, you think you somebody. If you weren't always hunting people's chickens, you'd be just fine." Hawk snatched his feather off Wolf. Just then Guinea Hen came along by dancing. Wolf says, "Guinea Hen, you sure think you somebody, but you don't see your own skinny head. If it was bigger, you'd be just fine." Guinea Hen took back her feather. When the dance was over, everybody left. Wolf was all alone out there, all alone and awful hungry. No food. Wolf started up crying, "Ow!" Then comes swimming by who they call Aunt Fish Horse. See, Wolf is out there near the water. Can't get home across it. She says to Wolf, "What's wrong with you? Are you sick?" "Are you sick?" Wolf says back, "The birds loan me feathers. I fly to the dance, and after a while they take their feathers back. Then they left me all by myself out here." Wolf says, "Auntie Fish Horse, if you take me to my own place, I'll pay you for it." "Well, jump on my back," she tells him. And so that's what Wolf did. She took him on to his place by way of the water. Halfway there, Wolf notices that Aunt Fish Horse has milk. He will take her milk from her as soon as he reaches shore, and he does. At the beach, he pulls out the milk. He left Aunt Fish Horse crying on the beach. There came Nephew passing by. "Why are you crying like that?" he asked Aunt Fish Horse. She tells him, "Wolf did it. Wolf tore out my milk." "If you pay me, I'll put Wolf back into your hand," says Nephew. "If you could do that," says Aunt Fish Horse, "I'll give you whatever you want." So Nephew headed for home. Halfway there, he starts a-hollering, "Get my knife and my bowl. Wife, wife, there's a fish horse lying on the beach. Wait for me to kill it." Wolf heard the hollering. "It's mine," he called to his nephew. "I left Aunt Fish Horse lying there to get my own knife and bowl. Don't you touch her. She's mine." Wolf hurries down to the beach with his knife and bowl and his wife, too. He grabs Auntie Fish Horse to unalive her. But she grabbed him back, got him by the leg, and pulled him into the sea with her. Wolf's wife is crying at the sight. "Don't cry," Wolf tells her. "Aunt Fish Horse is just playing." Aunt Fish Horse dives to the bottom, stays a minute. Wolf is up again. His wife is still crying. "Don't cry like that while I'm still breathing." Wolf tells his wife. Aunt Fish Horse dives again, stays down a long time. She comes up. Wolf is choking. His wife's still crying. "Better had cried now." Wolf chokes and scars to his wife. "Poor Fish Horses." Me. Aunt Fish Horse dived to the bottom with Wolf. Wolf came up 2 days ago. He was full of little fish and sand and water. Nephew caught the little fish. They had a funeral for Wolf. I saw it go by. All his children cried for him. All his people did too. Fish Horse Peck's cowball, also called fish cow, a manatee, or a walrus. This is a version of a black folktale of African origin, one of hundreds of such tales first told in a Portuguese Mandingo dialect. The tales were brought to the northeastern United States from the Cape Verde Islands by black Portuguese immigrants. The Cape Verde Island group was formerly a colony of Portugal and is now a Portuguese overseas province. Again, in the 80s, this is what it was. It could have changed. This is published in the 80s. That lies some 600 miles of the West African coast. So, I don't know if it still belongs to Portugal, but it's about 600 miles of the West African coast. The immigrants from the Cape Verde Islands are descended from African slaves imported by the early Portuguese to work their plantations, from Europeans, the Portuguese, and from most of the principal types associated with the African continent, including Arab and Hamitic. They are also descended from enslaved Africans who were gathered on the islands to be shipped across the Atlantic. Hold on, I have to look up what Hamitic means. Okay, here we go. So this book was published in the late 80s. 85. At that time, they were using the term Hamitic. So Hamitic, which is where she's talking about, the origin of these stories, which is important because it gives authenticity and good references to the story instead of just saying, hey, here's a story and here's where it came from with no references. However, since then, they no longer use the term Hamitic, Hamitic. That's because that term, non-African peoples had that term and attributed to a group of people from Africa, Africans, that they were more advanced. And they said they were more advanced because they had contact with European and Middle Eastern people. And so it was a racist term because it divided Africans into superior and inferior. That was since debunked based on linguistics, and you have to understand linguistics and that whole thing to understand. So it turns out that all the advances that they were crediting those African people with, the African people did that all by themselves, not because of any kind of other influence. So now they call it, you would use the word Afro-Asiatic, and that is a linguistic term, complete linguistic term, which is based on language, and it's Arabic, Hebrew, ancient Egyptian, Berber, which is from North Africa, and the Ethiopian language. That classification is what you would use now. So let's start over. The immigrants from the Cape Verde Islands are descended from African slaves imported by the early Portuguese to work their plantations, from Europeans, Portuguese, and from most of the principal types associated with the African continent, including Arab and Afro-Asiatic. They're also descended from enslaved Africans who were gathered on the islands to be shipped across the Atlantic, but they were left there when the trade ended. The trade to the U.S. ended almost completely in 1864. It ended officially in 1870. Slavery ended in the Cape Verde Islands in 1876. Similar tales told by the Cape Verde immigrants about birds taking back their feathers are found in Africa, Jamaica, and among Amerindians, which I'm assuming is an outdated term, but I'm not going to look that up. Just assume that she probably means Native Americans. The tale, Wolf and Birds and the Fish Horse, is taken from the Wolf Lob and Nephew Tobin cycle of tales similar in intent to the Buki monkey and the rabbit cycle tales found in the Bahamas. Whew. The important thing is, before you believe where tales come from, whether it's, no matter where it is, make sure to look up their resources and their references, because a lot of people can say, I mean, I could say, hey, my last name used to be McClintock, and I have family tales, and these are from Scotland, and I could just make them up by picking things out that people associate with Scotland, and it could be absolutely wrong. So I think that is why I left that in, because it's important to question things, especially in older books. We see this is 1985 from a Black American writer, right? So things get updated, and we have Google now and ChatGPT-4, and especially when you're reading older books, you will see many, many things that are inaccurate. So anyway, thanks for learning with me. Happy Black History Month. Stay smart. So yeah, next week is going to be fun because it's fanciful tales.